Chapter 9. Godzilla charged the old champion, only to stop and gawk as his foe began sliding on his tail in a flying kick. The impact knocked the wind out of him and knocked him onto his back. But unlike other Godzillas, he could still fight strategically from this position. He swung his prehensile tail and wrapped it around his attacker's leg, pulling it from under him, burrowing himself some time to get up. Not enough time, as the heroic Godzilla sprang to his feet almost immediately and began bombarding his still struggling opponent with atomic blast, hoping to end the battle quickly. Violet spikes crackled and turned orange, and he spun around, intercepting the blue beam aimed at him. There was no contest. The orange ray quickly overpowered the blue beam, exploding in the defender's face and bringing a cry of pain as he collapsed. The green Godzilla saw an opportunity and leaped high into the air. When the champion stood up, he saw nothing in front of him, but on a hunch, looked up just in time to see his foe land on him. He screamed in pain, and his green-scaled foe roared as if to taunt him before attempting to bite his head. The old hero was able to shift his head and neck enough that his foe bit down on the ground. Then he freed one of his arms and punched his enemy's neck, bringing a strangled groan and making it get off him. Godzilla was quickly back on his feet and grabbed his rival by the tail. The tail quickly wrapped around his arms, but the old king didn't care. That would actually help with what he planned to do. He lifted his foe high into the air and then slammed him back down. The green-scaled Godzilla was stunned by the impact. Even when the alpha predator had thrown him down, he had merely allowed gravity to do his dirty work. The champion was not content with that, using all of his strength to drive him into the ground. He did this again and again without mercy, monitoring his foe's state of mind by gauging the grip of his enemy's tail. With each blow, the grip seemed to tighten, until at last, after dozens of impacts, it began to loosen with each blow, until the tail went limp. Exhausted by the effort, Godzilla gratefully dropped his green rival and moved on to the next phase of his attack. Approaching his fallen foe's head, Godzilla turned and began slamming his tail against it over and over, intent on breaking his enemy's skull. But the one with the razor-like spines refused to die. Suddenly, its head snapped up and it bit down on the offending tail. Godzilla screeched in shock that his foe was back up so soon and attempted to pull his tail away. His foe pulled back, gripping the ground with his claws to avoid being dragged forward by his attacker, until the tip of the tail gave way. The green Godzilla spat out the bit of the tail as he got up and roared another challenge at the grey champion. The other Godzilla spent a moment inspecting his tail before renewing his own challenge, and the two foes rushed at each other once more. They exchanged brutal punches and claw slashes, the former knocking out teeth and the latter drawing blood. The green Godzilla lunged at the grey, biting down on his arm. That was a mistake on his part, as this forced him to hunch forward, and his own arms were not long enough to continue attacking, whereas his opponent was able to repeatedly pound the side of his head with his free hand. Reluctantly, he released his hold, unable to withstand so many powerful blows to his head. He shook himself like a dog to clear his vision of spots before rushing back into combat. Meanwhile, the Titans, The Permian apex predator and the resurrected mutation were battling ferociously. The Elder bit down on the mutant's throat, intent on tearing it out, but a nuclear pulse pushed him back and charred his armored hide. The mutation retaliated by channeling energy through its claws and ripping at various cuts and burns that were not fully healed. The Elder changed strategies, attempting to once again dig through his enemy's chest to tear off its armor. But this time, the mutant Godzilla knew what was happening and unleashed an atomic blast at the predator's already injured gills. As the predator moaned in pain, the mutant crashed into him with all of its strength, knocking him over despite his greater weight. Deciding that the turnabout was a fair play, the mutation began stomping on the elder Godzilla, pressing down with all 60,000 tons of his weight. But the alpha predator had not survived for so long by being easily slain. It charged its own atomic breath and fired at his foe's face, burning its eyes and forcing it to back away. He rose to his feet as his foe staggered backward and prepared another of his devastating tail whips. The mutant recovered from the burning of his face just in time to see it coming and spun around quickly. Both tails lashed out at full force and both struck each other and the rival's hip area. The predator barely flinched, but while the mutant cried out in pain, it had prevented disaster. Because of its secondary brain's locations, its hip bones were extraordinarily strong, and so had not broken beneath the impact as its ribs would have. Turning quickly, the younger Godzilla fired its atomic breath at the Elder's midsection, intent on burning away its armor. The Elder howled in pain, but marched forward, refusing to fall or yield. Godzilla ceased fire, but only to prepare a stronger attack. His spines flashed with azure and then crimson light as he charged the spiral ray once more. The Elder did not know what the color red could mean, but knew that he did not want to find out, and he reached his foe in time to grip his jaws and seal them shut. It was a valiant but futile effort. A powerful red nuclear pulse threw the eldest king through the air, almost causing him to fall on the two smaller Godzilla who scattered to avoid being crushed. The elder groaned from the pain. The nuclear pulse had compromised much of his armor and seared his hide, but he stood. He knew now that he was about to die, but he refused to do so laying on the ground. He would fight for every moment and every breath until the very end. The mutation snorted, as if to say that the end was not far away. One last time, the Elder powered up its atomic ray. The mutation waited, as if it wanted to prove that such a thing would not matter in the end. Both fired their respective beams, and the red spiral ray steadily pushed blue flames back further and further until the inevitable. The beam was forced all the way back to his mouth, and the Elder's head exploded in a shower of fire and gore. Not content with victory, the mutation continued to fire the red spiral ray across the newly fallen corpse, setting it ablaze with one blast and obliterating it with the next. He roared victoriously into the dark sky, and was then struck by two atomic blasts, one blue and one orange. The Grey Champion and the Green Godzilla looked at one another. They were both smart enough to know that, on their own, they could not defeat the one that had come back from death, but together they could bring it down. They both bellowed at the giant, who growled contemptuously before roaring back, and the two smaller Godzilla rushed their next opponent.